Welcome to another episode of The Coffee Break with Russ Garrett. Every weekday, Russ is joined by a musician, author, pastor, or another member of the community for an in-depth discussion about Christian topics and events. The Coffee Break is recorded live at 10 a.m. weekdays on Hope Radio KCMI 97.1 FM. And now, here's today's edition of The Coffee Break.
Yes, put that smile on your face. You are listening to the Coffee Break on Hope Radio. You are going to love our conversation today. And if you have a song you want to hear, give us a call at 632-5264. That's 632-KCMI. Well, Kyle Justice is the father of 8 children who homeschools them with his wife of 30 years. Kyle's background is shooting documentaries and TV shows for cable networks like ESPN, National Geographic, the Outdoor Channel, and Fox Sports. His work has been Emmy nominated. In 2010, he began shooting documentaries and TV series focused on science from a biblical worldview. And when shooting these projects, the family often travels together in their 36-foot RV all around the country. The kids get involved as crew members, hosts, and editing assistants, with over 40 programs produced and over 100,000 DVDs sold. Their work has been shown in Christian networks throughout the world and can be seen on video-on-demand platforms like Amazon and Right Now Media. And most of their shows can be viewed at awesomecity.com. And it's great to have Kyle Justice on the phone. Welcome, Kyle.
Oh, hi. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Well, you are very welcome. Great to get a chance to visit with you about what you are doing. And I got to ask, you've been doing these documentaries and TV series since 2010. And could you share how you got interested in this? What was it that sparked that desire to do that?
I don't know if you have enough airtime. No, just kidding.
We'll take quite a bit.
Yeah. What happened is actually when I was 11 years old, my dad's hobby was filmmaking, and my twin brother and I got involved in producing, our own films, and then he got video equipment. We started doing that, and our high school offered, video production classes. And so, I've been doing video for, 40 years at least. And so, from there in high school, I heard a creation science speaker talk about just how the evidence really supported the scriptures, and I was doing video at the time, and I think God just put it on my heart back then. It's like, someday maybe we can, put those two together. And as my oldest son, Noah, was getting along to be about 13, we went on a big family road trip to the national parks in the western United States, and I took my camera gear with me, and we just started shooting footage and kind of came up with the idea, hey, let's look at, producing maybe a series for kids on national parks and what evidence supports Scripture rather than long ages and naturalism. And we produced it, and it turned out to be really successful. And from there, we just started producing other programs, more documentaries for adults, some for kids. And we've just been so blessed to see how God has really grown it.
Yeah, and the kids got to love it, being able to travel the country and do this homeschooling thing and see a lot of history and then look at the world in which we're living from that science perspective, the biblical science perspective of that. And I'm thinking there's a lot of listeners out there thinking, boy, I wish I got to do that when I was growing up. That would be really cool to be in the Kyle Justice family, right?
Well, maybe. My wife and I, we are adventurers at heart, and we come from the Northwest originally, and we love to hike, we love the outdoors, and we wanted our kids to have that same passion. And when we started looking at doing some type of adventurous road trip, We went in our Suburban, just a 9-seater Suburban and 2 dogs in a trailer for 28 days. And after we got back, we thought, this is great, but maybe we should look at, maybe buying an RV. Because there's a lot of potty stops that happen,
Sure.
when you have 10 people in the car. So, but we did. We found a used RV, and we said, okay, it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was reliable, and we started hitting the road on these road trips, and we started producing content. There's a show you and I were talking about before we went on the air about debunking evolution, and we went down to a studio for a week and worked with some other people that were actors and scientists and so on, and writers, and we shot that. But the kids, were right there hearing all of this great evidence that supported Scripture. And then we did a show on reptiles, and the kids were handling the snakes, and not the scorpions, but the lizards and that type of thing. And not only that, but they're helping to shoot cameras and supervise the script, and even my kids have even hosted some of the material as well. So we've kind of opened the door wide for them to really be immersed in this, and they love it. They love the adventure, and they love learning about God's creation and really good science.
Yeah, and I was telling you that I loved those debunking evolution videos, because around our dinner table at night, we'd have our meal, and typically we'd have a little devotional time, and I'd just pull out the computer and I'd pull up some of those videos there, and we'd watch one of those debunking evolution videos, and just great content in there, and it was presented in just a really fun way. And it was great to be able to introduce those to my kids as they're getting ready to go on to college, and some of the things we talk about, some of the things that they'll come across, and some of those views out there. And well, is there any validity to that? And how do you answer that? And so it was fun to be able to have those videos pulled up and to be able to watch those. And I was asking you if any of your kids were involved in those. I thought, well, because they've been involved in a lot of the things you're doing, but I guess they weren't a part of those.
Well, they weren't on camera because it was just a kind of a teenage guy and girl, but we have some behind-the-scenes videos we shot and we put out along with that project, and you'll see my kids all throughout it. They're doing makeup, they're throwing things into the set for the actors, and it was a group effort, a family effort, and what a memory we have of that. Just a few years ago that we did that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that is just you found something there that I'm sure that as you look back on that and what that has done to bring the family together and to strengthen those relationships, I'm sure you have seen the benefit of that, just traveling together, participating. This is something everybody gets to have a part in, and everybody has some ownership in that as you present these, and it's got to be a real strengthening of relationships that takes place in your family just as you get a chance to do this, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. It is such a pleasure to homeschool, because your kids are with you all the time, and some families might who use public school, they're like, wow, that would be kind of crazy, but it is crazy. But the amount of time that I get to spend with my kids, and really disciple them as a father. My wife does most of the actual teaching. But when it comes to our road trips and the science shows that we produce, we're all into it. And whether it's hiking, down to the bottom of canyons or being in a studio, we're all involved, and all of them are like, they're eager to help and be a part of the production and be a team. And that's been a valuable skill, whether or not any of them go on to do anything in production or whatever. They can look back, I believe, on these times as growing up in the Justice family, and hopefully they'll also want to do that with their children. And so it'll be fun to see how they grow into adults and have their own families.
Yeah, and I was wondering if there's if your if you're seeing any desire there on the part of some of the older kids to actually want to do something from this, if this is sparking an interest, saying, I'd really like to do something that in this area that I was really introduced to just from my upbringing and what we've been doing as a family. Have you had some of those conversations and seen how that's impacting the kids and maybe directing them as to what they might want to do in the future?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Each one of them, from our 23-year-old down to I wouldn't say our 5-year-old because, she's 6-year-old, she's pretty young, but, all of them really seem to have a desire to want to serve the Lord and to please Him. It's something my wife and I have tried to do is to encourage them, to have for it to be their own faith. In other words, this is what Mom and Dad believe, and this is what you need to believe. We really want to encourage that. But, when it comes to the areas of science, none of them are saying, I want to be a biologist, Dad. But, my oldest girl, she would love to be an archaeologist, But, that's kind of interesting. And then my oldest son, who's now 23, he's married, Noah Justice. He was the host of our first series. He's studying to become a mechanical engineer, so that's, it's not quite the area of biology or anthropology or whatever, but, it's there, and, it's something that he wants to do. But then even my 22-year-old son, he is studying animation up in Vancouver, BC, and he's done a ton of work for me behind the scenes doing different graphics and editing and such for a lot of the content we produce. And, other kids operate GoPros and so on. So it's kind of all over the board, but, it's something where, I'm not sitting there going, hey, you really need to take up my mantle, kid, We really encourage them to follow what the Lord has for them and what God's put on their heart to do.
Well, yeah, and as you're talking about like mechanical engineering, and I think about science, those early scientists, the first scientists really were people of faith, were they not?
Oh my, yeah. If you go back to some of the earlier type people like Newton, Faraday, you have Louis Pasteur, and there's a whole bunch of them back there that they either believed that God created, or even some of them, many of them actually walked with Christ in their lives, and so they used their science simply as a way of learning more about God's world and how God created the world. And it's really in the some of these other scientists that wanted to go away from that, and so they really pushed naturalism and that everything happened by chance. And this is even before real good science came about, meaning microscopes and telescopes to look at the universe and all these things. Whereas they get deeper and deeper into real good observational science, evolution is just continuing to break down because they're seeing so much complexity and so much design that it really points back that there had to be a creator. And it's just fun because, these early scientists that believed that from the beginning, they didn't have to be, argued against as far as their belief in creation. But now it's just so evident. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and it was because of their faith, their belief that there is a God who created things very intentionally to work a certain way. It wasn't just random, accidental. It was because of their faith, their conviction of the organization of all of it that actually led them to believe, then we can investigate this. This makes sense. There's got to be a reason for this. And so it really set them on that. Whereas if you didn't have that as a starting point, that the universe has some sort of organization to it, it would never lead you to even want to pursue that, right?
Oh, very true. It is interesting because you have two world views, and as I was saying, as science has progressed, we see more and more about the way the universe looks, all the way down to the micro world, is what I call it. And it's interesting because you start to understand that it's a worldview. It's not really science. Some people come to me with our programming, or maybe they're reacting on social media and they're saying, "Well, science proves you wrong." And my big question to them is like, okay, what science? How do you define science? And they might say, well, it's evolution, and it's like, no, that's a certain perception, a hypothesis of the way things work. But science is there's two types of science. There's forensic science, and those are things that happened in the past, and we weren't there. We didn't see it happen. It's like a crime scene, a murder scene or something that a detective goes on and he's like, gee, I need to find out what happened here. And they need to piece together all these different observations. Maybe there's hair on the floor that they can get DNA from, and all these different things. But they're still kind of guessing. As they get further into it, they realize, okay, we think this is what happened, our best guess. And it was funny, several years ago I was on the plane with an actual forensic scientist from a police department, and it was a great opportunity because I got to ask him, are you guys always right? Do you guys walk into a scene with already some preconceived ideas of maybe who could have done it? And he goes, yeah, we do. And it shocked me because it's like, wait a minute, that's not good science. And yet, that's what he said, that that's often the case. But then you have operational science. And that's stuff that we can, a laboratory that we can take something into a lab, like a chicken, and we say, okay, my hypothesis is a chicken lays an egg. And we can see him lay an egg over and over and over, and then we can make a law, the scientific law that chickens make eggs. No, but, that's real simplistic, but it's operational science. And both of those things put together help us to really understand where God is coming from, or what his creation and how he created it. But then scientists, as we look at observational science, it's like more and more it's really showcasing God as the creator, not that it happened by chance. And so they really have to cling to something, and it really is their worldview. God can exist. And if you ask scientists who believes in naturalism and evolution, is there a God? Most of the time they're like, well, maybe not, and they've already perceived that God didn't start anything. And so that's a worldview, and we need to understand that. It's a belief. It's really a faith. But then again, we have a biblical worldview, and it is based on faith, but also if God really did create, like the Bible says, and we believe he did, then we should be able to find evidence of that in our worldview, and we do every time we go out. So much lean towards the idea that God created and that there was a flood, and all of these things show up in what we observe in science.
We have on the phone Kyle Justice joining us, and great to have him joining us. Great to have you out there as well, talking about his family and what they do, traveling around, doing these different documentaries, shooting these films, and making these available. Now, you make these available. How are the different avenues that you spread this around that you make those available? We talked about the video on demand that you have available there. Are there other places that you make these available as well?
Yeah. So there's different places that sell our DVDs, also as digital files. You can get them on our main platform, awesomesitv.com. But at the same time, there's other places, like we have some of them on Amazon, some of them are on Prime, Amazon. There are other places like Answers in Genesis that have the Creation Museum and the Ark, and they sell many of our titles. And so we also have our main website at awesomesciencemedia.com, and there's links there to our social media, like YouTube, where you can view different segments. And then there are some TV stations and networks that actually air our content as half-hour television shows that you can watch. And so that's a couple different ways that people can view our programming. But we try and make it available as much as we can, and then reinvest what comes in to produce even more programming. So we're real excited to get it in the hands of people.
Now, is any of your video sold to like different, say, homeschooling curriculum writers, or is that part of how your material gets? Because I know it's really, you do a lot of directing toward homeschooling because it's very educational and good science educational that a lot of homeschoolers like to use in their curriculum, right?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question, because originally we just started producing content because there was just a demand for it, whether DVD here or there. But with like our Awesome Science series, which is 12 episodes about the national parks, we have a distributor for that, Master Books, and they developed a whole curriculum guide, just for that series. So a lot of families will use that in homeschool, and they'll kind of go through it, episode at a time, or maybe a few segments at a time. And then we're developing curriculum for like study guides for each of our other titles, and on our video on demand platform, a lot of the titles already come with a PDF you can download and use for your students and such. And then we have another series that we just finished off 12 episodes on astronomy, called The Heavens Declare, and we have study guides for each of those that we're turning into a book that people can buy or download or that type of thing. So we're kind of moving more towards that with a lot of our programming, to where they can use it for like a curriculum pack. But sometimes, some families are like, well, we've done our math, we've done our languages and so on, and here, kids, just watch this program for science. And so it just depends upon how a homeschool family wants to present the content and present the curriculum. But we're getting there as far as the amount of stuff that we're more organized on curriculum.
Sure. We have Kyle Justice on the phone, and Kyle, we like to sneak a song in at some point in the program, so I'd love to do that now. If you want to hold on, we'll be back in just a few minutes and visit more about what you are doing and the impact that is having. So can you hold for just a few minutes?
You bet. Look forward to it.
All right. So let's hear from Hope Darst and the Promise Keeper. That's Hope Darst seeing the goodness all around her, the goodness of her God, just like Kyle Justice looks around at this creation. He says, I see the goodness of a God who created everything, wonderfully designed that. And he is traveling with his family. They're shooting videos, and they're having just a great time out on the road in their 36-foot mobile home, and just putting together all these great educational videos. And it's really making an impact out there. So there's like 100,000 DVDs, I guess. Is that what I read that was sold there? You've sold like 100,000 of those, Kyle?
Yeah, well, we have, I think 33 video titles out right now. And then we have another about 10 to 15 that we're finishing off. So we're always, shooting, always, working to produce new content. But with our Awesome Science series through Master Books, running the numbers on that, and then I think we have another one on Mount St. Helens that's done very, very well. And so, I'd kind of say between 100 and 150,000 DVDs we sold of all of our content, put together. It's kind of slowing down because DVDs are a little less popular now, and it's moving more into video on demand and getting programs that way. So the appetite has changed as far as the type of media that people consume. But overall, it's a little harder to measure. But yeah, that's kind of the general numbers that we've looked at.
Now, do you have a favorite of all time? One of those videos that you shot, or a documentary, and that you look back on and say that was really powerful. That was my all-time favorite one that we put together.
That's a hard question to answer.
It's like, which kid do you like the best,
huh? Some of the projects we've shot in a studio, like on green screen, or we've shot locally to where we were living. Others, I've gone out on location all around the Rockies, for our Receding Floodwaters documentary, an Ice Age documentary we did. And so, seeing the incredible sights of geology and how they relate to the global flood, I'd probably lean towards those, or maybe the Mount St. Helens documentaries we've done, where we went. I flew in a plane all around, or a helicopter all around the crater and the blast zone, and there's some powerful lessons there that we learn about catastrophe and how that relates to the global flood. And I feel like those are pretty powerful, and we do that. So I guess it depends what direction you want to go and how I want it to be the most impact.
Sure, yeah. And of course, you talk about homeschooling your kids, and I'm wondering, did you grow up in a homeschool family yourself? Were you homeschooled?
Actually, I'm not. My wife and I were both from public school, and we really didn't know much about homeschooling growing up. It really wasn't a thing. And probably in the late 70s, early 80s, it started to grow, and that's when I met the first family at our church that was homeschooling, and just loved the family dynamic and what they were doing. And I thought, maybe someday my own family, I'd love to see us do that as well.
And so you decided to do that. Was that overwhelming then to you when you got started doing the homeschooling, or how long did it take you to really feel comfortable in that role of homeschooling?
Well, I don't know if you always feel comfortable, at one point, but when my wife and I got married back in 1991. So I've been married for just about 30 years. I said, maybe we should homeschool someday our kids. And she kind of felt pretty overwhelmed by the idea. And so we didn't have kids for a couple years, and then we started trying, and then it had some challenges, but it looked like we might even have children, which was a huge disappointment to us because we really desired a big family. God put that on our hearts to do. And then, at about 3 or 4 years old, our first son, we just started doing some programs. We started doing some curriculum with him. And, as you get into homeschooling, you'll learn that each of your children, might start at a different place, maybe language-wise or math-wise or so on. And so, and that's the thing, is you need to be careful as you teach that in homeschool that, you don't do the cookie-cutter type thing that each child is going to be the same. And that really is the beauty, though, of God's creation and our children, is that each one is unique and different. God has purposes set up for them and personalities and so on, and so you're kind of customizing your children's education as you go, but there's some incredible opportunities as you begin to do that.
Well, and that really makes what you did, as you travel around, really cool, because it sounds like you can really tap into all the different ways of learning that your kids all demonstrate. Some of them learn better in different ways, and they have different, as you said, they start at different places in their schooling. And did you see, just in some of the things you did, just as you travel and did some of the things that you're doing there with the documentaries and the different videos, did you see that really facilitated well and was able to meet all those kids where they were at different places?
Yeah, when you have 8 kids and you're traveling, there's a lot of dynamics going on. You've got, some kids are outgoing, and I would be not telling the truth if I said, there was some arguments and fights along the way between the kids. When you're that close, for long periods of time, it can be stressful, but it's a great opportunity to learn to be really good parents, and also to train your kids to really love each other.
Sure.
But as far as specific areas of learning, obviously as you get into, like, if you're visiting the museum, each one is getting the same information, but they might be consuming it differently. What's interesting though is often maybe I'm holding the camera as we're going through different locations and museums, or different hiking places that we're hiking into. But I think that the key is to keep it fun. But some kids, especially if they're shooting, maybe like with our son Noah, he's more in front of the camera. The kids behind the camera, maybe they're helping carry a tripod, or maybe they're reading signs, or they're talking amongst each other about what they just learned or what they just saw, and then it gives me a chance as a dad to share about, hey, what these petrified trees, what did it say about that, and what do they really find, and all these different facts and things I'm bringing out, and different questions, and so some of the kids early on, they were like, hey, Dad, Noah's doing his show. When can we do? When can I get my show? It's like, I've got to create content that these kids can host. So we ended up doing that. We have another show we've been shooting called Dino Kids, and that's some of my middle-aged kids are involved in that show. And they're learning stuff along the way as we write scripts about science and paleontology, and they're reading these scripts, and they're bringing out this information. It gives us a chance to talk more about that and about worldview and how to really understand what other people believe, and to love them, but also to respect them. I remember, 2 years ago we were at Dinosaur National Monument, and I was over shooting some stuff, and I look over at my middle-aged kids my middle kids, and they're talking with a park ranger, and I'm like, this looks interesting. So I went over to them, and there they are. They're debating with the park ranger about how maybe these dinosaurs weren't so old and that type of thing. And I was kind of proud of them, but there's certain approaches that are better than others, and it gave me a chance to really work with them and train them how to ask the right questions and stuff. So it's been a blast, and we're not over. So it'll be fun to see how God takes us to the next level.
Sure. And of course, this past year we had this pandemic going on, and how did that impact what you do as a family with the different things you're involved in, the traveling and the filming, and even in your own homeschooling? How did that impact what you did, and what are you seeing that impact on homeschooling even in a broader arena as well?
Yeah, it's fascinating to see what has happened in the last year. COVID has really impacted a lot of public school families, and where schooling just stopped or it went online, and a lot of people who have been in homeschooling for a while realize that a lot of families might even make this jump now, where maybe they had been considering it, or maybe out of necessity, that they need to homeschool their kids. And so you saw this big change. In fact, some conservative estimates as far as homeschool kids were somewhere between maybe 1.5 million to 2 million kids in the country, and some of the experts were estimating that it could quadruple as far as numbers this last year in homeschooling. And we've certainly seen a lot more people asking questions, ordering our DVDs and curriculum packs and so on. So we're seeing that growth. I think the biggest challenge is some families who are new to homeschooling, they kind of conceive that homeschooling is just like regular school, except we're gonna be at home. And actually, homeschooling's quite a bit different. And there's not just one way to look at homeschooling. There's different styles. Some stick to the basics and a little more freestyle, and in some of the ways that they approached areas of interest for their kids. So if one kid's really interested in science, they can do the basics of languages and math, but then they can help their kid focus on science. And it's not always, 9 to 3 p.m., 9 in the morning to 3 p.m. It's homeschooling happens usually a lot quicker, where the kids have more free time that they can learn and have those interests. And we certainly did that in our family. You asked a question about how did COVID affect us. Not a whole lot, and probably not to a ton of homeschool families either. Obviously, there's some things you can't do, like go to the zoo or go to museums or that, because all those things were shut down. So it did limit us a little bit. when we did our road trip this last summer, we didn't do a lot of the national parks. We didn't do a lot of the museums because they just weren't open. So we found other, ways to explore God's creation as we went through. So, anyway, I hope that answers at least part of your question.
Sure, and I'm thinking that even though folks maybe couldn't go visit some of those places, they can always just look up some of those videos that you put together and say, hey.
Oh, they could. Yeah, and like our Awesome Science series, it features a lot of the national parks and some museums, and there's other resources out there as well that other homeschoolers are using. I know of one ministry called International Association for Creation that they were able to get into some of the big museums like Smithsonian, and they do virtual tours from a biblical worldview. And so there's more and more resources, and I think there's a transition going on, not just corporately in the workplace, but with homeschooling, and people are seeing some great value to lead their kids and disciple them and educate them, and it's exciting. I think there's some great opportunity that's happening now, and that's going to probably be coming in the near future as well.
Yeah, and as you look at the growing of that homeschool movement, maybe more people looking at homeschooling, do you think, is there a certain demographic or a certain types of people that maybe are looking more seriously, do you think? Are you hearing about, if you were to do a survey, well, it seems like more people in this area here would be interested in homeschooling?
Well, it seems all across the board. Like I said, things are changing dramatically in the workplace as well, where, a lot more families, even if they're dual income, they're working from home. Not all of them, but a lot of them are, and it kind of forces them to reevaluate, where they're doing with their children, and if they should homeschool or not. Some people say they could never do it, and there's some people that it's like, yeah, let's go for it. And so it's kind of, I don't think it necessarily depends upon the demographic. I think there's a big challenge to some families that go full online and all their children just home learning from a computer. There's different ways that people are approaching this, but like I said before, we can't really approach it like, okay, we're just doing regular public school, but we're doing it at home. Homeschooling is a lot different, and it almost gives a chance for some families to kind of breathe a little bit and say, okay, how are we going to do this for our children? How do we want them to learn? And for some other people, maybe they're a lot more, this is exactly what we need to be doing, and they need to follow this plan, and so on. And so to say there's one way that people are approaching it would not probably be a little naive in a sense, because it really is all over the place, and depends upon the parent. Some parents would look at it and go, I could never, do homeschool for my kids. And yet, many people have said that, have come back and have been encouraged and challenged and found support groups, and they've been able to do it. And it's come back as one of the most rewarding experiences that they've ever done. And I've heard other stories that maybe it was a bigger challenge than they could do. And so, there's a lot of resources out there for, co-ops. There's a lot of support groups. There's a lot of moms out there with blogs that try and give support to other moms, and so we just encourage people, don't do it alone. There's a lot of great resources and a lot of great help and support to help you do this, and we really believe it's the best thing for the children. And I think it ends up being one of the best things that a parent could do.
Sure, and certainly as families are introduced to some of the things that you're doing, and seeing some of that science that you bring out, and as you talk about that stuff, I'm sure there are probably a lot of Christian families out there that are maybe thinking, well, I like this approach much better than maybe what they're learning in the science class at their school. That they're not getting that faith component there. They're not actually getting a different perspective of it. It's all coming from that naturalistic view, and frankly, I don't agree with that. So there's probably a lot of Christian families that'll rethink their schooling for their kids when they start looking at those videos that you're putting out.
Yeah, when I look back to when I went to high school and junior high, man, what a different world than it is now. And with different things happening politically, it looks like it's going to be even more of a challenge for people of faith to train their children. And that's where homeschool, I think, is going to be really strong to help parents and help their children. And I think for the first time for some people, they're seeing this content, the learning and curriculum coming in from the public schools that their children are learning, and they're standing up and saying, no, I don't want my children to be learning this. Or, it really draws up something within them to say, I'm going to take my children back from the public schools and start to train them. And a lot of people are left going, okay, then what type of resources do I have to train kids from a biblical worldview? And, there's the basics for math and reading and such, and those aren't necessarily biblical worldview, but, hey, you can read the Bible together and use that to help train them to read, that type of thing. But when it comes to things like science, you really need to delve in and look at, what resources are there out there. There's some great books. And what we produce in videos, we really hope that it is a strong resource that families can use to train their kids to learn things from biology to paleontology and geology, and to understand both sides and what both sides believe. And then we try and do that in our videos, is to not just say, you must believe this, but it's like, no, here's the evidence, here's the worldviews, which way does the evidence lean? And we say we believe it leans towards what the Bible says. And so we hopefully we can be an encouragement, but also to help kids and parents learn a strong biblical worldview to science.
Yeah, and even if they're going to keep those kids in that environment that they are in, and maybe they aren't getting that biblical view of science and some of those things, they can supplement that even, and have some of those evenings around the dinner table and say, hey, let's watch some of those videos that Kyle has put out, that his family has put out, and let's see maybe a different a different perspective, a different way to look at this that maybe you're not getting in the classroom where you are right now, and begin that discussion there. That might be a good place to start.
Oh, yeah. We would really hope that parents who have kids in public schools, would be very active in their kids' lives, and to find out what are they learning, but also to use resources like ours and others that it can help the kids to think through and ask the right questions, and even in a classroom, maybe in a secular classroom, maybe in a public school classroom, maybe they can, introduce some doubt or, introduce some other questions to what's being presented, and maybe have a good discussion in class. And but really, it's about discipleship and about discipling your kids in the Word of God. And this is one way we hope, as a resource, they would use to help educate and disciple their children.
And after they watch some of those videos and see you traveling around having all that fun, they're going to be saying, hey, maybe we need to travel as a family, right? So what do they...
We hope so. It is such a blast doing it as a family, and it grows us closer together. And, there's ways to do it easily. If they want to, get more hardcore on it, they can get an RV, or we like an RV because my wife and I can both drive and not have to stop along the way, only when we need to, or want to, I should say, because there's a bathroom right in the RV. So it works out pretty well. And the kids have their own little spaces that they can go to, little bunk beds or other places in the back of the RV, and read along the way and discover God's creation along the way too. So we highly encourage families to do the same thing.
Sure. And if folks want to, again, get some of those videos that you have, can you, again, tell folks how they can learn more about how to get those, learn more about your family, more about your ministry? Where can they go? Yeah, sure. Our main ministry is Awesome Science Media, and it has the same website, awesomesciencemedia.com. And they can learn about our DVDs, the different programs we produce. But the actual content all sits on awesomescitv.com, and it's a subscription on demand, or you can rent or purchase different programs, and a lot of them come with study guides that they can download as PDF files. And so
we're always producing new content as well and putting it on the platform, and we're starting to really get other people's content as well and build study guides for those. So we're really excited to be a resource, a growing resource for anyone who wants to train their kids or even themselves wants to, they're science enthusiasts and they want to learn about these things from a biblical worldview. So we're excited to bring that to our audience, and people haven't even seen what we're doing yet.
All right, so visit awesomesciencemedia.com and to learn more about the Justice family and what they're doing. And Kyle, thank you so much for taking time to visit with us. It's been great to have you on, and keep us in mind if you have some videos you want to talk about or anything that you're doing that you'd like to let our listeners know about.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, we have a lot of new stuff coming up, so I'll be sure and reach out.
All right, and have a great rest of your day. Keep up the great work, and we'll look forward to visiting with you again soon.
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Coffee Break. New episodes are posted weekdays. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or your favorite podcast service. Of course, you can also hear the show live, broadcasting from our studio in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, every weekday at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on Hope Radio, KCMI 97.1 FM. If you want to find out more about KCMI or Christian events coming to the KCMI listening area, you can go to our website, kcmifm.com. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/KCMIFM. Our theme music is Life of Riley by Kevin McLeod of Incompetech.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of The Coffee Break.